Cooperation was first invented in 2001 by Danny Ocean and 10 friends when they decided to rob the famed Mirage, Bellagio and MGM Grand casinos, which are owned and operated by the dreaded Terry Benedict. But Terry Benedict is not the only one capable of coercing cooperation from uneasy allies, and Danny Ocean is not the only man with smouldering good looks capable of rallying a ragtag team together, because you too can be that man, even you women, with co-op games. Now, use those smouldering good looks, Janice, and sell me an espresso, you silver fox. Co-op games try to capture that magical team bonding that can only come from something as fraught as robbing a casino or solving a crisis or narrowly avoiding catastrophe, but it boils it all down to lovely bits of card and plastic, and obviously does away with the whole being arrested afterwards thing in the case of robbing the casino. And the meteoric rise of the things has rocketed them right to the top of the gaming market, because people have finally realised that if you can't beat your friends, it is so much better to join them. But where did they come from? How did they take over? And where do they go from here? I'm hopefully going to try and tell you, so come and roll with me as I explain co-op games. In short, co-op or cooperative games, if you fancy, are games where all the players work together. Unlike other games in which there's only one winner and one loser, in cooperative games you all win and lose together as a team, a unit, a band of brothers and sisters pulled out of retirement for one last job. And this could be something as straightforward as pulling off the perfect heist, or escaping from the universal monsters, or clubbing together in order to survive the First World War, or it could be something even more abstract, like trying to get a teammate to guess a word, or chaining together a bunch of tiles in order to make a fireworks display, or helping a little girl escape from her own dreams. Generally speaking, in co-op games you're presented with a puzzle to solve, either within a strict time limit or without reaching a certain number of fail conditions. And it's this cooperative camaraderie that has made the games become such a beloved and established corner of the industry. And some of the games coming out blend group dynamics and team strategy into rich and compelling tales of companionship, and co-op games produce some of the best organic storytelling out there, and I mean in any medium. And that's not to say that co-op games are not competitive, because they might actually be the most competitive games out there, because your team is clubbing together to fight an enemy that you can openly despise without violating the social contract. A Terry Benedict you have to defeat with your cunning plans, except that this enemy is not another player, it's the game designer, the Machiavellian game designer sitting behind his box going, I know what to do, you gotta do this, gotta you, game designer. You. Because the game designer is the worst person in the world. They know exactly what you and your teammate are trying to achieve, and therefore they've stuffed the game full of hidden little mechanisms or random traps and complications that are going to make your life harder. For instance, they might spawn a load of enemies randomly into the game, which could turn your entire carefully plotted plan onto its head with just the flip of a card. And that's the great thing about having a designer as an enemy, because when a human player is out in front, yeah, sure, it's fun to rage against them, but that can be a little bit socially dicey, and someone's feelings might get hurt, because not everyone enjoys the heady thrills of getting into combat with their best mate, because that makes people uncomfortable, especially in a hobby that is often accused of being gatekept by somebody's ability at tactical thinking. So co-op gaming brilliantly solves this by having an enemy that is ever present. The designer's sticky little fingerprints are over all of your pristine new cards, and they're perfectly designed to mess with your game. The enemy is your game. And the shadowy game designer behind the curtain, the faceless, remorseless monster that you can cuss up and down in a way that will unite your band of merry warriors and spur them on to achieve glory together with a cry of "F*** you, game designer!" Hi, Karen. What about my personal glory? I hear you scream into the comments down below. We do read them, so do be nice. And it's fine that you want personal glory, and the best co-op games get around this by assigning each player an individual role. Maybe you're the best at safe cracking, maybe you're the sniper, maybe you're the fastest, maybe you're the toughest, maybe you're not any of these things, because I am. So when co-op games are really cooking on gas, it is really like that scene in a heist movie in which each individual team member is carrying out the one and only task that only they can do, and it's all coming together in perfect harmony and leads you to run away with all of the money. Co-op games, they're f***ing brilliant, they're great. But don't just take my word for it. In the spirit of cooperation, let's ask some other people what they think.
I like co-op games a lot because, especially if your friends are competitive, a co-op game is a nice respite from what you normally play, and it's really good to see how well you work together.
I personally love cooperative games. However, I do know that if you are an early beginner gamer, it can be a bit difficult if you're playing with people who do play more board games, because you might end up being told, oh, this is what you should do. If you look 5 steps ahead, you can see that this and this and this will happen, and sometimes that can be a bit overwhelming for a beginning gamer.
Co-op games are what got me back into board gaming after I haven't played board games in a long time. I think Pandemic was the first one that kind of got me back into it. I think they're a great way to get people into games that don't like that competitive nature of board gaming and what ends up being a throwing the Monopoly board across the room type of experience. So yeah, I'm a fan of them. I think sometimes they can be a bit repetitive, so there's a lot of options out there now, which I think is great.
So we do now need to talk about the elephant in the room, and that elephant in the room is telling everybody what to do and when to do it. We're talking about the alpha gamer problem, or quarterbacking as it's sometimes known. And it's a big problem in tabletop gaming that is pretty much solely limited to co-op games. Simply put, it's when someone is a lot more dominant in the discussion about what to do in a tabletop game. Maybe they've played the game before, maybe they're more tactically adept than the other players, or they at least think they are. Now, a lot of modern co-op games have mechanisms in place to stop this kind of thing happening, like the Magic Maze and Crew, which forbid players from speaking, or the Grizzled, in which only the player is allowed to know which cards are in their hands. And I think if you're just getting into the hobby in co-op games in general, it's something you need to be aware of, but what it ultimately boils down to is think about people's feelings and do not be a dick. Unless that's your assigned role, in which case do be a dick.
There is a bit of a problem in the board gaming community of, if you have been playing board games for a really long time, or you feel that you are a pro board gamer and you know everything that there is about board games, it can be a bit daunting to beginner board gamers to try to get into the hobby, because, you know, in so many communities this is a problem of being told this is a good game, this is a bad game, you're terrible for liking this game. If
you end up playing with someone that's played quite a bit of co-op games, I think you can run into that person potentially trying to run the game, and it becomes well, I'm just not really playing a game. So there have been some new games, I think, that have come out recently that have mitigated that a little bit. Games that have maybe different powers and different things, but are still co-op, that helps.
So where did co-op games come from? Well, cooperation in gaming has actually been around for donkey's years. Look at something like Dungeons and Dragons, which started in 1974 and brings a party of players who are all playing mystical, fantastical, brilliant characters together in order to combat a foe. Although in this case, it's not some shadowy game designer that you're going up against. Your foe is the Dungeon Master, who is a player sat at the table, a human player, a nasty, horrible human player whose name is George, and won't let you use your magical elven sword to just lop off the Dark God's head, even though you rolled really highly and you asked really nicely. And then, you know what? Your mate died, didn't he? He died in that battle there, and you had to escape through the portal. And now everybody, I might be projecting, but yeah, like, you know what you did, George. You know. One of the first examples of co-op gaming that wasn't some sort of twist on the one versus all mechanic was Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, which came out in 1982. In that game, players are given reams of information about a crime to sort through and have to work together to piece together the mystery. It's iconic, and it's still available today in fancy new editions. Then there were other games like Reiner Knizia's Lord of the Rings in 2000 and Arkham Horror in 2005, both of which were very cooperative and successful with it, but could be argued to be too dense and heavy for the casual gamer. But it wasn't until 2008 when this genre of gaming went from an outlier within the hobby to one of the dominant voices within it, all with one game, and it's a game you've likely played because it's a word you've likely heard non-stop this year. It's Pandemic. So yeah, as much as it kind of causes me to shift my bottom uncomfortably in my chair to talk about Pandemic in the middle of a global pandemic, you can't really talk about success of cooperative games without talking about the game that brought them to the dance. Published in 2007 and designed by Matt Leacock, who was inspired by the SARS outbreak of the early 2000s, Pandemic has spread through the world like... Honestly, we're just going to have to grit our teeth through this bit. Pandemic takes place on this world map filled with cities, and as the game progresses, 4 different diseases are going to spread across that map in the form of cubes, and it's the player's job to cure them all before the spread becomes too much to manage. The brilliance of Pandemic is that each player has a different role. Maybe you're the scientist who's brilliant at making cures. Maybe you're the medic and you're better at removing cubes from the map. Or maybe you're the dispatcher who can teleport other players around the world. Even without being the world's saddest facsimile for the state of the planet right now, Pandemic is a brilliantly tense little game. It's tight, it's got this ingenious design that's just punishing enough, but just light enough for casual gamers to really get their hooks into. It's got that one more go vibe about it. It's simple enough to lull you into thinking you've got everything under control, and complex enough to send consequences cascading across the map with the turn of one single card. The most hated card in all of gaming. The game sold like gangbusters, won numerous gaming awards, spawning 3 expansions and numerous Pandemic but for editions like Pandemic but for the Spanish flu, or Pandemic but for ancient Rome, or Pandemic but for dice, or inevitably Pandemic but for Cthulhu. It's one of the biggest franchises in all of board gaming today, and excellently bridges the gap between the casual player and the hobbyist, so much so that it is often one of the top recommended titles for people to get into board gaming.
Pandemic is one of those games that a lot of people will be introduced to early on in just being introduced to board games or cooperative games in general. For me personally, I have played it once and I enjoyed my time doing that, but other than that, there's so many other cooperative games out there that I really enjoy.
Pandemic is a great co-op and a great intro game, I think, into modern board gaming. I've played it so many times over the years that I don't know if it is my favorite co-op board game anymore, but it was at one point, I think, one of the greats. I like the basic version of Pandemic, not with any of the expansions added into. And then they've come out with the Pandemic Legacies, Season 0, 1, and 2, which I played most of Season 1 and 2. I've never finished Season 2, but I thought it was pretty good. A nice change to the standard formula.
I love the fact that it's different every single time you play, so you can either be like the medic or who is basically God in that game. Dispatcher, and they all have different roles that help you to save the day. I played Pandemic wrong for the longest time. I thought you had to cure everything. You just need to find the cure. So when we discovered that, it became a lot more fun.
So co-op games are huge, and sometimes that's meant literally, because it's time to talk about the game that hobby gamers absolutely love. It is time to talk about Gloomhaven. The first thing to note about Gloomhaven is it comes in a box you could bury a dog in. I'm in fact sat inside a Gloomhaven box right now. It's bloody gigantic in every way. It's got hundreds of cards, about 100 different playable scenarios, costs over £100, and provides a sprawling, months-long experience where you and friends can play one of 17 unlockable character classes, each with its own unique deck and fighting style, battling your way through the D&D tinged world of Gloomhaven. It also takes over half an hour to set up and pack down, making it the most board game ever. It's taken gaming by storm. It's made millions of dollars across a number of different Kickstarters, and it's currently ranked #1 on Board Game Geek, the IMDb of board games. That's right, it is, according to a ranking system powered by gamers, the best board game ever made. And it's got a sequel coming out, Frosthaven, which in the space of a single Kickstarter has raised almost $13 million, which is the most funded game campaign in the history of the crowdfunding platform. It's a big deal and a very complex big deal, which is why I wouldn't recommend it to someone just starting out in the hobby. But if you feel like you're going to have a long, lustrous history in the hobby, Gloomhaven is something you need to be aware of because it is the pinnacle, the peak of Hobby Mountain.
Now Gloomhaven, I mean, that set some precedent as far as Kickstarter and the sequel Froststarter kind of, how much money you can raise and how much money a board game can raise. I think it's taken role-playing games like people that want to get into Dungeons and Dragons, but distilled it so you don't need a kind of a dungeon master there. You don't need someone that is overseeing the game and let everybody participate in a really fun way. It is a big box game and it takes a lot of time to play all the scenarios. It's a game that I would love to be able to have the time to play, but I just do not.
It costs so much, and I know for a lot of people this is a big wall that they just will never be able to play Gloomhaven. And I don't think that's necessarily an issue. I think that because of everything that is in that box, everything that you do get to experience through it, it makes sense that it is the price that it is. However, I know a lot of people, unless you have a group of friends that you'll be able to meet once a week and play it together so you can all buy it together, it's just unlikely that you're ever going to actually be able to experience the full game.
Of course, if you'd like to try Gloomhaven, there's a new version, Jaws of the Lion, that's been released, which is a sort of pared down version of the game that requires way less setup, is way cheaper, but it does have fewer bits. Gamers bloody love their bits. In conclusion, co-op gaming is a relatively new but definitive phenomenon within board gaming, from things like Pandemic, which is touted as the perfect way into the hobby for new starters, to Gloomhaven, which is the apotheosis of board gaming heft and excess. At Phenomenerds, the reason for our existence is to get you into board games, and there may be no better way of doing it than co-op gaming. After decades of board gaming being stigmatized as being mean-spirited like Monopoly or intimidatingly tactical like chess, co-op gaming is a brilliant way to bond players together. It can make you stronger as a unit and provide that heady rush of triumph for a group with even the wildest range of skills, just so long as the alpha gamers can rein themselves in. You guys, you can't, can you? You know how to play it. You've played it before. And as the effects of the real-life pandemic are still felt throughout our society, the appeal of collaboration has never been greater, and co-op games are the most welcoming and inclusive form of hobby gaming. And hopefully for you, they can be the start of something beautiful, your long, historical journey into the world of hobby games. Thank you for watching this Gaming Explained on Co-op Games. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment down below letting us know which games you want to check out. And if you're a seasoned gamer, why not leave your recommendations for co-op games down there too? But not to fear if you are a brand new gamer, that is the entire point of Phenomenerds, because stick around on the channel because later this week we're going to have a collection starter video telling you the best co-op games to get right now. So subscribe to Phenomenerds and get on board.